welcome to the very first NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. This week we shall be discussing the role of the new media versus traditional media. We'll be discussing the advantages, disadvantages of both, and also if there are any rules in this new playing field. To help me do this, I have Manish Tiwari, former INB minister, and I think a man who presided over time at the cusp of this change really. We also have Raghav Bahl, who's recently launched the Quint, a digital and news information portal. We have Priya Sahgal, who's adept at both the worlds. He's still he's on TV, he's on print, and also he has his own website. He's blogging. He's very active on social media. We have Shiv Vishwanathan, social scientist. So, Veer, can you first begin by telling us exactly the difference between new and old media? You know, making it a little simple for the viewers. Because very first question Shiv asked me is, do we include TV in the new media or not?
No, I don't think we do, Priya. I think when all of us started out, TV was the new medium, and people like Raghav took the plunge and invested in television when the big media houses were all newspaper based. I think what we have now is a completely different world. Television is very much part of old media. The new media, there are many, many variations, and it's almost impossible to define. But essentially the factors that I think probably define it are: one, it's based on the internet. Two, it's consumed very differently from the way traditional media was consumed. It looks like it will be consumed in a couple of years, almost largely on mobile devices rather than computers. Three, it's much more democratic. You required a lot of money to set up a television channel or a newspaper. Because it's much more democratic, the whole nature of news will change. In the old days, we used to say freedom of the press is guaranteed to anyone who happens to own one. But that's changed now, because you can't really suppress anything as you could in the old days with big newspapers. Media on the internet will take over. And the other and slightly more worrying thing from the perspective of professional journalists is, so far at least, people in India have been disinclined to pay for news on new media. The economy, if there is an economy in the revenue model, will probably have to be advertising based or something else based, because people, every time you try and make people pay for news, it doesn't work. It is, I think, a huge, huge threat to traditional newspapers. It's been a threat all over the world. Why should India be any different? It won't be a threat to television if television adapts to the mobile world, because I imagine the future is largely video rather than words. But I am an amateur, it's Raghav who's the professional.
So Raghav, over to you. Are you going to be a threat to all of us?
No, I think just to add a bit to Veer, what really distinguishes new media is a very simple fact, but a very powerful and very disruptive fact. All old media I would categorize as media which is linear. It goes from one party and it's consumed by many. New media is two-way. It's not linear, it's non-linear.
Interactive.
It's interactive, it's conversational, you can pitch in as much as the editor. So that's the fundamental difference from a one-way linear broadcast to a two-way interaction. And from there emerge all the differences of content, of form, of the fact that it's not something that one person's opinion dominates. As far as threat is concerned, some of the legacy media companies are now beginning to wake up and realize the power of this. So whether it's the New York Times, they have been able to, or they are in the middle of a successful transition. So my sense is that the people who are able to make this transition, the legacy players, will survive because their brands and their audiences continue to be loyal to them, and they are masters at creating content. But they have to change the mindset. It's not about my saying this is the big story. You have to pick up the big story from what the viewer is today responding to. It need not be the big political story of the day. Often, as we are seeing in the 5 months that we've been in this business, the big stories are social. They're about trends. They're about web culture. They may not be about politics.
It's a whole new grammar.
It's a whole new grammar. So I think people who'll make that transition will be able to survive and thrive in the new media. Those who don't will fall prey. And there are newer players like us who are coming in who don't have any legacy. We are creating content for this medium. Okay. We have the challenge of revenue, as Veera said, so not all of us are going to survive. But the ones that do will make the breakthroughs. My rule of thumb is that if there are going to be 5 decent players in this business, as in any other industry or market, the breakup will be 3-2. 3 legacy, 2 new, or 2 legacy, 3 new. And we don't know where it's going to end.
Manish, what should worry you about this new digital and social media?
Well, first of all, Priya, I don't think there is any fundamental incompatibility. See, if you look at traditional media as Veer has defined it, in India, it's still going to grow at an 8% CAGR, till about 2019. Now, this is extremely robust growth if you look at the global figures. Television has already got to 168 million homes, and if you look at terrestrial, it has almost universal coverage. You see, the new media is a different kettle of fish altogether. The internet is the most audacious experiment with anarchy, and it has succeeded. It represents the largest ungoverned space on planet Earth. Never before in the history of humankind has so much power concurrently resided on so many fingertips. There is more data which is produced every 2 days than from the beginning of civilization till about 2003. So what you're talking about is really two different civilizations at all. There is a physical civilization which has evolved over the millennia, and there's a virtual civilization which is evolving. And the difficulty is, that is what worries me, that we are trying to apply the rules of the physical civilization to a virtual world which we do not understand. And in the next 5 years, the virtual population of the world is going to actually outstrip the physical population. So you are actually looking at a whole new reality, which unfortunately, given our binary mindset, the way most of us have evolved, are still not able to comprehend.
Can you comprehend for us?
No, I'll look at why it's not comprehensible.
You
I think
disagree?
no, I think I disagree. Because if you look at it, for all the futurism, it's a futurism of the market and of technology. It's not a futurism of democracy. And I think there's a difference here. Because I think when you're looking at these kind of systems, we're looking at new forms of surveillance, new forms of manipulation. I'll tell you the first mistake made here. You confuse choice and alternatives. You have enormous choice, but we have really a few range of alternatives. And I think the difference is, let's take internet. See internet as a form of evolution. Evolution is full of choices and alternatives. Internet doesn't have that same mutative power as yet. One has to see whether technology is as mutative as an evolutionary matrix. Second, if you look at it, the language is still the old language. No matter what you say, as legislators, you haven't found the new language. So let's put it, what's the difference between a network, a public, and a commons? All three languages are used to describe net. So I think what we have to look at is, are we going to have dialects of technology, which would be very interesting, or are you going to look at a new world, which is completely different? And I think there's a third danger. India has a way of domesticating technologies. I don't think the Gutenberg world is going to disappear so quickly.
Just one clarification on that, alternative and choice. What's the difference? I mean, the internet does give choice. You can't argue with that.
I agree with you
But
completely.
what's the difference when you say it doesn't give alternatives? It does, right? At the click of one button, I can go to any alternative. The whole world of alternatives is open to me.
No, I think alternatives also require different kinds of narratives. See, choice is easy. I can choose between this and this. Alternatives demand different kinds of structures. So at one level, you look at it, the complexity is still not complete.
Yeah.
No, I agree with much of what he says, but at the same time, it's very difficult to argue that an environment in which a handful of media houses dominate television, newspapers, etc., offers you more alternatives or more choice than this one does. I mean, clearly there is more choice here. Where I think he's right is that often the kind of choices that are offered are much the same. There are no real alternatives. Right. Often we are manipulated by technology within media. This is an animal that, as he says, has yet to evolve. It hasn't developed his own identity. But that it is fundamentally more democratic because, as Manish said, it's no longer one person, actually Raghav said that, it's no longer one person spreading out news to millions. It's thousands reaching with other thousands or lakhs with other lakhs. I think the fundamental nature of that beast is by definition more democratic.
Yeah, but you know, the difficulty with alternatives is going to be, for example, if you were to extrapolate in the future and say that the internet acquires artificial intelligence, which makes it capable of thinking for itself, then at what point in time would a cyber attack, which is not even launched by humans, which is launched by an automated internet on artificial intelligence, actually qualify as an act of war in the physical space? So therefore, when you're talking about the evolution of internet and you're trying to impart it with biological capabilities, you're actually running into a gauntlet where it will become almost impossible for those who practice Westphalian sovereignty and try and apply the rules of the physical world to be able to even keep the world as we know it intact. So therefore, I think that's why what is fundamentally important is that this conversation on agreed rules of engagement, you know, as opposed to some kind of a global internet architecture, governance architecture, need to emerge very quickly, because I think the internet has already run ahead of us.
But that's more, Manish, that is more really the technology underlying the internet. Because when you say artificial intelligence, I mean that's something, that's a phenomenon much beyond the internet, right? That's really using the whole digital architecture of the world. The internet is a medium of exchange, which resides within that. So I mean, your fears on artificial intelligence are very well taken. You know, and people as consummate as Bill Gates have said that you really could be writing your own demise if you let this technology go. But I'm just saying that artificial intelligence is beyond the internet, right?
No. I think this is what you have to see, and I think Manish is right. If you look at the culture of the internet, it comes from two things. One, defense technology, ARPANET in particular, which gives you a certain kind of surveillance care. Second, the beat generation. Now, if you look at it, it's a combination of anarchy and surveillance of the most interesting order. It's this contradiction that makes it more interesting. So what I'm saying is, you're right, but the encounter between the two rights will have to encounter a series of wrongs. How you legislate for it, the language is interesting. And that's why I like it. The more adventurous the statement, actually, the more interesting are the limits.
So, Veer, can you see the wrongs over here?
No, I like to take off on what Manish said, that the internet and technology have advanced so much beyond us that for most of us, we don't understand artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is what happens on television channels where people think they're intelligent and it's all artificial as far as we're concerned. But in reality, regulators, even people who are capable of understanding what is happening are probably, if they're a couple of years behind what is happening now. And what's vital, therefore, is that we need to set up some framework, because all media needs some kind of order, if not regulation, if people have a problem with the word regulation. The second fact, which is, I think, important from the point of view of journalists, is that the whole notion of edited content in a traditional newspaper or even a good television channel, people would file a report, somebody would look at it, somebody would edit it, say this is right, this is wrong, this is libelous, this is damaging, and would then put it out. What the internet does in journalistic terms frequently is eliminate that whole editing process, because the emphasis is A, on democracy, so everybody is a journalist, B, on speed. If a story comes...
There's a little point here, and I'd like to just make a distinction, because the last 5 months, there have been huge learnings that we've had. There is a public space for journalism and there is a private journalistic or private content space. And the two are not as much meshed as we fear. The private space is your Facebook posting, your Twitter rant. That's private, and that really gets a resonance amongst very few people. The public space of journalism, which is what we talked about, the edited content, the one which has been processed by a trained mind, by an editor, that gets much more resonance. I have been very pleasantly surprised by the numbers that we get. Frivolous content does not get numbers. You'd be amazed on platforms which are news and information platforms. In intelligent content, we started off thinking that, oh God, this is going to be a boring piece on Chinese nuclear submarine threatened attack on India. If you put two admirals together who can do a very intelligent debate on it, it gets a lot of resonance on the internet. So the internet is not a medium of rants. It is seen as a medium of rants.
No, but Priya, there's a contradiction there. While I agree with Raghav, you see, the fact is that there is a whole low level of content which has floated up to the surface as a result of the new media. In fact, traditional media is slowly and gradually going to become an aggregator or a credibility marker, something like an ISI or a ISO 9002 standard. For example, if let us suppose the guy who had tweeted or live tweeted the Abbottabad attack on Osama bin Laden's
good example
residence, if his credibility would have been benchmarked somewhere, he would have actually got picked up, and the world would have had almost a live commentary on that whole attack. So as you go forth, while Raghav is right, rants and private articulation may not get traction, but given the volume which is available, there is a whole new field of aggregation which is going to open up.
We need to take a short break, but don't go away, because when we come back, we're going to continue with this roundtable discussing the new media versus traditional media. Guardian NewsX roundtable. And also one thing, Veer, what will happen if there is a 9/11 attack like Bombay? There's no governing, there's no this thing. At least in the TV media, at the end of the day, people were told, don't show this, don't stream this.
In fact, that's a bad example. 26/11 is
Give
actually
me a-
the worst example
But
of
after-
media running riot. People died because of television channels. There's no getting around that.
Okay,
The
how do
government
we-
failed completely to keep reporters away to control how that was done. No. So 26/11 is a bad point, but if you're making
But the
it
guidelines post 26/11.
yeah, which will never be enforced. But that's not my point. My point is that partly because of the economics, which makes it difficult for traditional media to make as much money, and partly because of the pressure of speed from social media and internet
Right.
outlets, what's happening even in traditional media is costs are being cut to the bone. The editing process is going because people can't afford editors more and more. They are more interested in people onto the field. This term that many people in journalism hate, citizen journalism, citizen journalist. What does that effectively mean? What it effectively means that any guy out there can tweet something and you'll take it.
Correct.
You tune into any television channel, including your own. You will have the anchor giving news, and equal prominence will be given to tweets. Tweets coming from people you know nothing about, whose antecedents have not been verified, whose opinions are frequently bigoted or violent, whose opinions frequently emanate from control rooms run by political parties. So in that sense, traditional media, which is in any case in economic trouble, is writing its own death warrant.
Just to add to this, what we are seeing now is, and to pick up not your 26/11 example, but maybe the Abbottabad example and maybe some of the other examples. Today, the first information report of any breaking news will come on social media. You have to live with that reality because you can't be everywhere, while someone is everywhere. And therefore, today, Twitter has launched a new app called Periscope. Periscope allows me, as I'm sitting here, to live tweet what is happening to my followers. So they can see this even before it goes on your TV screen. So as an individual, I can become a live broadcaster. Every person in this world will become a live broadcaster. In fact, we've just seen an app which does that. So the point I'm making is the first information report will today come from social media. Editors like us, we have to accept it. But what happens thereafter? The filter of credibility, the filter of expertise, the filter of perspective, the filter of analysis, that still belongs in the realm of the expert. So therefore, there is a future. There is a big future for journalism.
For digital journalism.
Yes, I mean, consumption will move to digital platforms.
But I think that's the thing. It's the nature of consumption which becomes interesting, because consumption is innovation. News is invention, but consumption is innovation. And I think what is interesting about this media is the way it consumes anxiety. Even experts are anxious, because to a certain extent, with this network, with its sense of anarchy, anticipation, I think what we are trying to domesticate is the anxieties of the future.
But at the bottom of it, the benchmark of credibility will always remain. And that's exactly what Raghav was saying, that there comes a point when people would want to consume something which they believe has a certain modicum of verifiability.
Absolutely.
And therefore, if you look at consumption patterns in the net, while people consume tweets, people consume Facebook pages, but when it comes to looking for news, they'll still go to an established website or to somebody whom they feel has credibility. Because
That's
one
where
thing
Raghav
doesn't,
comes in.
yeah, one thing doesn't change. The one thing that doesn't change in news is that credibility is the bottom line.
Absolutely.
Yeah, with one difference.
Which?
I think social news and the social construction of news is very different from the political. And I think this is the important part. I think you widen the notion of news and news credibility. The old notion of the classic which was a tuning fork for news, doesn't work because I think there's a multiplicity of tuning forks. Because it's the way news changes and it's transformed across a grid, which makes this network fascinating.
We would give us the last word since I think we are out of time on this.
I think everyone has said everything. Just 2 points going forward. One is, Shiv talked about the nature of consumption. I've seen that with my friends. It began with people not wanting to read that many newspapers the next morning because they'd already seen the news on television the night before and knew what the papers were going to say. I find now when people wake up, even if they've seen television in the evenings, many people I know go on to Twitter. They look for links to articles that they find interesting. So rather than consuming whole newspapers or whole television channels, people are consuming in bits and pieces. In a way, that's not like the music business, where nobody buys an album any longer. You get a link to a song, you download it, and you don't care what's on the rest of the album. So I think patterns of consumption in terms of news are changing much more than we realize. Second, on the stuff about credibility and all that, I think it's a little more nuanced. Let's give you a topical example. Rahul Gandhi goes to Amethi, Smriti Irani goes to Amethi. These are facts. A credible news source will repeat that. Rahul Gandhi beats Smriti Irani with his wit. Smriti Irani destroys Rahul Gandhi with her wit. Those are opinions. Unfortunately, these days on television, as much as on social media, they are being passed off as fact. And I don't see a distinction between so-called credible news channels and credible newspapers and social media when it comes to that. I think the internet, social media have had the effect of muddying the line between news and comment. And that I think is dangerous.
That's a shared sin between traditional and
And
new
that's
media.
it, generally.
Yeah, but Veer, I think that is still transitory. You know,
I hope
as
so.
as you would evolve, you will find that these muddied waters will start getting clearer. As consumption patterns, what Shiv was talking about, you know, get more nuanced on the internet.
It will change.
It's transitory, and we hope for your sake that Rahul Gandhi finally gets to have the last word with Smriti Irani. But on that note, we're going to end this show. Thank you for watching this roundtable. We'll see you again same time next week.